Insurance isn't glamorous. It's not what we daydream about. It's paperwork, premiums, fine print. But when a disaster like a hurricane or tropical storm strikes, when wind rips off a roof or water floods a home, having insurance is one of the key ways to help you rebuild and recover.
Yeah, John, we're facing down a monster 125 mile per hour sustained winds. The bottom is quite literally dropping out.
In Florida, these disasters are becoming more frequent and intense. Since 2017, Florida has been hit by several catastrophic hurricanes. Think Irma, Michael, Ian, or Helene, leaving behind billions in damages.
Look at all the wood just floating down our street.
At one point, an entire roof line just floated down the road.
The whole roof is floating by our house right now.
Huge pieces of homes, and it just was flowing fast.
For many Floridians, the storm doesn't end when the sky's clear. There's the damage left behind, and the rising cost of recovery. A new University of North Florida poll shows that property insurance is now the #1 issue for Florida Republicans, more than immigration, housing, or even inflation.
Across Florida, the opinions of Republican voters in the UNF poll ran 20%, saying insurance is the most important problem, with housing and property taxes running second and third.
You know, I don't think it matters what end of the spectrum you're on. Everybody's affected at some level.
So, what is Florida's state government doing to meet this moment? How is it empowering homeowners to protect their properties? And who can access the programs Florida now has in place to lower premiums and mitigate wind and water intrusions? This is Empathy Affect, Forest Marsh Media's podcast that explores the human side of government. I'm Melissa Sosinski, and today we're joined by the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation Commissioner Mike Yaworsky. In a state where you see headlines about insurers pulling out and premiums skyrocketing, Mike's here to clear the air about insurance affordability, resilience, and what it takes to keep people safe and housed in the face of disaster. Mike, it's so good to have you on the show today. I know that insurance and navigating hazard risk can feel like a really difficult ball to untangle and navigate, so I'm so glad that you're here to help bring light to this important issue across this conversation.
I'm pleased to be here. It's a great opportunity anytime we can spread the word about what's going on in our marketplace or things that are happening proactively in Florida and elsewhere in the world to move markets forward and provide affordable markets for people. We love to do that.
So we have a lot of ground to cover today, but I first wanted to start by introducing the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation, which you are the commissioner of. For those who don't know, can you share a bit about your office's mission and what you do for the people of Florida?
Absolutely. In Florida, the Office of Insurance Regulation is an appointed insurance commissioner that sits at the top of it, appointed by the governor and the cabinet, which are the other statewide elected officials in Florida. And we're largely responsible for regulating Florida's insurance market. And that does everything from holding companies accountable to setting rates in all of our admitted markets and really monitoring the solvency and the capacity of our companies, which is given the unique scale and size and vulnerabilities of our marketplace, is probably one of the most complex operations insurance-wise in the world.
Not many people love to talk about insurance. It can often feel stressful or confusing, but you've dove pretty headfirst into committing your career to this space and now have been serving as commissioner since 2023. So why did you choose insurance as your career path? And why is helping people navigate the insurance landscape so important to you?
I just happened to one day years ago in California, in Georgia, meet the Georgia Insurance Commissioner, and I was working in Georgia at the time, and he, within 4 weeks, I got a call from his office saying the commissioner was very impressed and thought I would do well there. Would I be interested in interviewing for a job? And I did, and I liked it, and it was. I think what it comes down to for insurance for me is it's this thing that we all generally have to pay for. and we do it somewhat begrudgingly. But when you start peeling back the layers, it becomes so clear about how different life would be without it. Just take the example of the automobile. And we all have this, most states require, I think all states now require you to have some sort of liability insurance on your vehicle or property, depending on the jurisdiction. But when it comes down to that, who would invest in a car of any value whatsoever if there wasn't insurance back to it? It would be a much lower percentage of the population. I can't imagine many parents buying their teenagers a car or giving their teenagers their old car if there wasn't insurance wrapped around that. Same thing with homes. Who would buy a home on the Jersey Shore, for example, if it wasn't insurable? And so it really becomes this network of, and I think, capital preservation and allowing people to preserve wealth and protect wealth as they try and improve their own situation in life.
Yeah, I really like how you framed it as peeling back the layers, because on the surface, we often feel like insurance is out of obligation or legally we need to get it. But the deeper sentiment and safety net it provides is so important. I'd like to take a moment to look at Florida's risk landscape in terms of insurance. So, how would you describe the current state of Florida's property insurance market, especially in coastal and high risk areas for hurricane and tropical storm damage?
We are at a phase now. We had about really the third big disruption that we have had since Hurricane Andrew took place. It began in 2017 and roughly ended in 2023, or began to show signs of ending in 2023. This past year, we're fully in that recovery mode. The average cost of insurance and the property side increased by about 1% in Florida across all of our various territories. We were, for the first time since 2013, we were able to actually decrease rates in a number of areas in those coastal areas, including through Citizens, our insurer of last resort. So we're in a recovery mode right now. I think the lessons and the takeaways now are what else can we do long term to make sure we don't find ourselves in a fourth crisis or further mitigate that. So good news, we're in a stabilizing mode, but there's obviously more to do.
Yeah. And your office is doing a few different things to help along with that. So we're going to talk about some of that today. Right as hurricane season was about to begin this year, your office launched a new wind mitigation resource for Floridians. So tell me about the resource and how it aims to help Floridians be more proactive in taking measures to prevent and reduce damages and losses from windstorms.
Absolutely. So Florida, interestingly, I mean, we've done a lot of things right over the past 30 years, and one of those things has been actually taking the steps to build the hardiest building code in the country. We've also done research over the years, including most recently this past year, to look at what actually works in storms and what doesn't. And the building code has actually proven, especially on the newer products, to do a great job at mitigating against wind loss. And so one of the things we did, though, is we were looking at the various programs that exist around the state, some of the assistance that can be offered through the state or elsewhere. We didn't find necessarily a cohesive place that consumers could go to really capture the totality of what they can do in their homes to mitigate against losses. And so we launched a new tool to help consumers do that, to break that out and to show some of the data and science behind it in a cohesive and consumable way, but also to ultimately to give consumers help on where they could go and what specifically they could do to number one, mitigate their home against a loss, so their families, their lives, other things aren't disrupted. But number two, show economic options that might be available through either My Safe Florida Home or other areas to help them in that process financially.
For Floridians who maybe don't know where to start but are interested, can you walk us through what a wind mitigation inspection entails and how they could benefit financially or structurally from it?
It's really fascinating because one of the things we've learned over the years is that it's not necessarily just upgrading your windows, for example, to protect your house. That'll give you some additional cover. It's also not just upgrading your roof. It's also not just hardening your garage door. It's really the totality of the household that matters, what we call the envelope, protecting that whole envelope against a weak spot where wind can penetrate to break down the science a little bit, once wind penetrates any portion of that house, you have a pressure change, and it can cause a failure on a massive scale.
Wow.
So when we talk about mitigation, we talk about protecting the whole envelope. And so that's one thing we want to emphasize to homeowners, is that when we do some sort of mitigation effort, it's important that we think at it from that angle. And so one of the things we've done in this and we're redoing it right now to kind of take in new science and new understanding of the way buildings stand up to wind loss, is we've built a matrix out of what exactly works and what doesn't, and that if you did just upgrade the windows, how much less of a risk does your house become against the totality of the house. And so we've broken that down on the website in a way that's helpful, so the consumers can make the best choices for them. They give them an added benefit along the way. But it's really impressive when you look at the data, what works the most and what works the least in protecting that envelope, decreasing that premium as much as possible, and making sure that building can survive major catastrophic events like hurricanes. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that we're getting that information out there so the consumers can make the best choices for themselves.
Yeah. God, I mean, like normally I'm just thinking of roofs and windows. But that's a really great point about the whole envelope, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Can you maybe, like, for people who are trying to tangibly understand what protecting their home after getting inspection is like, what are examples of how they can then protect their home after getting an inspection? What changes can they make?
Well, I think taking one of the biggest ones that you just mentioned, which is roofs. And it is a major area that's obviously a huge part of the cost of the total insured value in a home. It's a durable product, really, no matter what kind of roof topping you use, whether that's a shingle roof or a metal roof or something else. It's a product that just by its nature and exposure fails over time. And so there's really good data out there about how long, for example, a shingle roof will last on shingles will last on a roof in Florida. We see it really withstanding water penetration for 20, 25 years, but wind penetration, the data that's available right now, shows it really lasting about 10 years. And so when you're making a decision about the roof type you want on your roof, shingle roofs tend to be a cheaper, shorter term option, but other roofing types like metal or composite tiles or other things seem to have both. And so what we're trying to do is just get that out there in the minds of consumers to know, there's choices available to them. Shingle roofs may be great for their situation, and they've accounted for the fact that 10 years is a reasonable lifespan for those roofs. Metal roofs are much more expensive on the front end, but appear to last a lot longer, up to 30, 40, 50 years. Making sure the consumers have that in their calculus as they're deciding what to do for themselves is best. And on the back end, all this stuff that we've done on the back end is making sure that when it comes to insurance, for the first time, we'll be recognizing in mitigation credits, for example, that we require the insurers to provide, that a consumer that does have that metal roof or X type of roof is getting an accurate discount for having made that investment. And so we want to make sure, roofs are a great example of how you can harden. It's not necessarily the best example because it can be a costly endeavor depending on your situation. But there are other things you can do. A reinforced garage door, that's modern and is a much more reasonable loss cost for a consumer to take in. If that garage door fails during a storm, that becomes a huge entryway for high winds and pressure to basically get through your house. And if you can, that sort of thing can do it. But there's dozens of things that we factored in, especially in the latest round of ARA testing, that will give a really comprehensive look at things. And it is available on the website on the different types of upgrades you can do to really to make a difference on the fortification of your house.
Right. You were mentioning how, people could be nervous about cost because roofs are expensive, or making these changes can seem daunting, even though the cost benefit can be good in the long term. So say I'm interested now. How can I access this resource, explore what I can do to my home, and are there any specific programs or grants available that can help offset the cost of building up my home mitigation?
I think all this information is available on our website. And then, you mentioned grants, and I think the biggest one that Florida has taken the lead on for decades, and we renewed it we kind of did it in 2008, 2007, and then we've renewed it again beginning in 2022 is the My Safe Florida Home Program, which gives out grant money for people to fortify their houses. Florida has invested over $1 billion at this point back into the pockets of consumers during the course of the past 2 years to help offset the cost of home hardening and mitigation, which is more than every other state combined, probably about 900 million more than every other state combined. The other thing that we've done is given annual sales tax holidays to home hardening and fortification to the tune of $400-500 million in tax relief to help consumers do this sort of thing. I think our website is this new tool is a great way for consumers to get more information about the mitigation program, some of the science behind it in a consumable way, and give them a bit of a guidepost on what they do, how you go through this process from step A to Z.
Yeah. So we've talked through the wind mitigation resource. I'm glad you talked through your grant, the program. But on top of this, I just saw that your office partnered with the University of Florida to promote home resiliency materials for water intrusion hazards. So can you speak to this partnership and how this, as well as the wind mitigation resource, are helping empower Floridians in protecting their homes?
I think, yeah, absolutely. I think from my first day on the job, I've felt it's very important for a market like Florida to be on the forefront of the tech and science that is emerging in these spaces for a lot of reasons. Number one, ultimately all of it is to help our consumers, but the biggest reason why overall is that Florida has got to continue to show progress in these spaces to make sure that interested parties, investment capital, companies, and others feel confident that we're building a market that is insurable. And so part of that, I think, is just demonstrating with real bona fide research that we're doing that. And so in this case, we've partnered with the University of Florida to really take the first steps. There's a lot of wind loss mitigation across the country. There's not a lot of credits or program, and in some cases research into other types of mitigation that can be out there. And so this study really focused on water loss, what we call water loss, water damage mitigation. And we viewed it as a first step to eventually move into where we'll identify actuarially sound indicators of what works in the water space that would warrant consumers getting a discount on their insurance bill for things they've particularly done or elements of their home that they have that would warrant a discount on their bill. And it's a great website. It's available to everyone. It's got a dashboard. Sometimes it's a little dense science-wise. I think this is a first step on kind of understanding how water loss works. But anyone interested I'd encourage them to go to that platform. We've actually broken out in many cases with particularity different surface types on everything from the roof to the floor of their homes to help people understand. If I have a water loss here, here's what the impact of this particular material I've chosen for the flooring, for the walls, for really every element of the home. And there's also some beginning research on smart home technology. There's products emerging that are almost user installable that you can just pick up at the store, add your Wi-Fi to it, connect it to a water line, for example, and it can tell if there's an unusual increase or atypical increase in the amount of water that's flowing through your pipes, indicative of a leak. Mm-hmm. And it will shut your water off automatically if it sees that. And that, a water loss, an inch of water in your home can be a year or more of your family's disrupted. By the time you go through that process of remediation to replacement, it's just the construction time can be devastating to a family and costly for everybody. And so if we can identify those technologies that are emerging, sort of rate and score them, and then do whatever we can to help people afford to install them in their homes, I think everybody in Florida wins.
Yeah. I personally live in New Jersey, not in Florida, but we've had to deal with so much flooding here ourselves. My parents are also New Jersey. And like, I remember as a kid, we were like shoveling water out of our basement and how stressful it is. So it's really cool that, you're exploring what's most cutting edge in helping people, be able to protect their homes, because like you said, it can be really disruptive to our lives. So this has been really cool. I mean, like, you're developing these resources, you're sharing tools, what's the future of promoting mitigation, but, spreading awareness to Floridians so that they could actually take action is a whole other thing. So communication is important here. So how are you communicating the resources you have and the cost benefit aspects of wind and water intrusion mitigation to Floridians? And, are you working with insurers or other local governments or state agencies to incentivize people to take mitigation efforts?
I think, in some ways, this latest crisis has been good for us. Usually, when you want to talk about insurance, you're not the most popular person at a dinner party. But if there is a silver lining to a lot of this, to a lot of the challenges we've had over the past few years, it's been that there's a lot of interest in how insurance works, how it's made, how cost is determined, how replacement cost is determined, and so that's given us a bit of a forum to highlight some of the things we're doing in this space, and get the messaging out about what consumers can do more. I think as Florida's market has evolved, I think one of the things I took away a few years ago was Florida has got to be more forceful in telling its own story about what's going on in the state and what consumers, particularly if you're a consumer and all you get is a bill on an annual basis without a lot of clarity about why this rate has changed, if you may not understand what is going on, what's driving the changes in the price of insurance, it can feel a little stressful or wildly stressful and a little bit out of control for you personally. And so every opportunity we get, we message these changes. We work closely with the CFO's office, the Department of Financial Services, and also the governor's office to message out there, as well as the Department of Emergency Management, especially immediately after a storm, as kind of those discussions.
I feel like just the way you've been talking gives me a lot of hope, even though, we see the news about how hurricanes are getting more intense and frequent, and you still see, the awful sort of damage that these storms come and bring through. And, I hate to say it, but Florida is often in the news for being the poster child for these problems. Yet your state is still experiencing net migration. So what do you think this says about public perception of risk, or maybe how people are, feeling comfortable living there with, whether it's the resources they have or how they're able to recover or just withstand it? And how does this shape the way that your office communicates about insurance and risk mitigation?
So yeah, there's hard and fast numbers around just the insurance market in Florida. You've got 27% of the world's cat risk is situated in Florida. We've built up $10 trillion in real assets on the ground in this state, which is we're now the 7th largest insurance market in the world on that side. And so it is a lot to insure and a lot to get out there. But we had some very difficult years of rate increases. I think the market there were some other third party challenges around litigation and other things. We also had a decade with no tropical activity impacting the state up until 2017, which may have lulled us into a sense of complacency. I think it lulled the world, frankly, and it was actually an interesting time historically where there were fewer catastrophic events of all types than what we know to be historically average. So it was an interesting time period when 2017 kicked up. But when we're looking at the market today, we're seeing that Florida is at a place where we had the lowest rate increases in the country last year on the property side, by a wide margin. We've gone from the most expensive place to insure. We're not number one as the cheapest place to insure by any stretch, but we're now the 4th most expensive in the country, so on a state by state evaluations. And I think that is both recognition of the risk that exists here. It's not going to be It's never going to be the cheapest place to insure. But there are other things with that net migration that people find promising about Florida. I think the other things that have happened over the years, where you talk about whether you're in that retirement space, when you have certain economic conditions here with no income tax and other things, but also, my parents, they moved us down here from Colorado when I was I want to say 9 years old. My parents had practically nothing and wanted a better life for themselves and their family. We were like the Beverly Hillbillies pulling into Hollywood, Florida on a giant truck. And they succeeded here. And so I think there's a lot. Florida has a tremendous amount to offer. And I think, cat risk is something that you do have to think about. I would also say the state's just gotten so good at recovery after hurricane events. We rebuilt a bridge in 3 days using the best science available. Most power is restored within hours or days after an event. And on the financial side, the state of Florida is in a different situation where a lot of states, just as states, are in debt, whereas Florida's got $22 billion in reserve. So it's foundationally a very good place to live in, and I think it does require us to keep thinking about the cat risk and mitigating against that. But overall, we're in a very good place that I think people still find attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is such a beautiful state and has so much to offer. So your passion and appreciation for the state and protecting it is coming across very clearly.
I also love New Jersey, for the record. So I have family in North Jersey, and so it's a wonderful place to raise a family too.
You were mentioning how coverage in Florida is still really expensive. And in many cases, in high-risk states, insurers are pulling out, or, it's damaging the competitiveness of markets for consumers. So what is your office and the state of Florida doing to ensure that there's still like a really robust and competitive market for homeowners in the long term?
I think we've done so much in the past few years. It's hard to point to just one thing. The legal reforms. Florida had a very unique law on the books that said that if you sue your insurance company and get $1 more than whatever the insurer offered you at the beginning. So if it offered you $1 and you sued and you got $2, then the insurer automatically paid for all of the legal fees of that lawsuit. It was a very unique law, unique to Florida, dated back to Reconstruction, and it was there originally for a very good reason, which was to make sure that people who needed help could get qualified talent to help them win a lawsuit that was merited. But Florida ended up in a place by 2019 where it had about 8% of all the property insurance claims in the country, 76% of all the litigation around that. Even today, with the law change, you can't go more than 500 feet in Miami without seeing an advertisement of some kind for law firm and legal help. Mm-hmm. And so the reforms just moved Florida in a place where every other state is, which is there's a contingency fee basis. And we're seeing really good results from that. We're seeing most of the savings that we're bringing into the space are from that reduced abusive litigation practices of some bad actors in the trial bar space. And so that's helped us stabilize this market a great bit. It's also given a lot of confidence. 14 new insurers have come into this market in the past 2 years.
Wow.
To provide coverage on the national level. You want to, in any state, you want a very healthy mix of the big, what I call the Super Bowl companies. It's the ones that are on the ads, the Flows, the Jakes, all those people. You want them writing a healthy amount in every state. And then you want some regional, what we call domestic insurers, which are usually providing coverage on a regional in a few states or one state. You want them kind of filling in those gaps. And then Florida has kind of a unique structure around Citizens and other things, our public insurer last resort. We're seeing nothing but good news emerge there. We see, our largest property writer in the state is, at this point, is State Farm, with over 800,000 policies. And we're seeing good national uptick in interest from other national carriers. That's what we want to see take place here. And it's, it speaks, I think, to their confidence. Large national companies can deploy capital anywhere in the world in many ways. And so it's really making sure we're, again, telling Florida's story, that you can write in this state, you can do it well, you can make a reasonable profit over time. You're not going to be able to go gangbusters in Florida, but this can be a good place to deploy capital, make a good return, and insure people and provide a quality product.
The reforms that Mike was mentioning on one hand keeps insurers in the Florida market, but he also mentioned that other recent reforms has given the commissioner and his office new authority to oversee accountability across insurers and how they treat customers. While these reforms have moved the needle forward, Mike's still advocating for stronger requirements that insurers give their customers clear information about what their premium and plans cover.
One thing that we've tried 2 years now, I'm hoping the third year will be the charm, that we will get what a transparency document on the very first page of every homeowner's policy that really just breaks out in simple consumable terms what consumers are paying for when they're paying for their insurance premium. Really just a pie chart of what their overall book looks like. And so it gives a description of, well, this is how much is going to pay for reinsurance. This is how much is going to the cost of adjusting claims. This is how much went to pay for ALE following a disaster, for example. This is how much the company actually made, if anything. And that we really want to use that as a mechanism to educate consumers about where their product goes. And so I think consumer education is going to be so vital going forward. We need really sophisticated consumers in the state, in any state, in any jurisdiction around the world, because it is getting more technical and complicated. We need to make sure we're doing that. So I'm hopeful the legislature will pick up on our transparency measures next year, and we'll make some progress there.
Yeah, I feel like throughout this conversation, your leadership in seeking balance in this complex insurance and risk landscape has really been resonating. We were talking about the unique challenges to Florida, how Florida has had to prepare in many ways because it's been the front lines of a lot of the disasters in terms of hurricanes and windstorms, tropical storms. But a lot of other states are now facing intense storms and, are just trying to get more prepared. And given your leadership in this space, I'm wondering if you'd like to give, states now facing these challenges, one or two pieces of advice to deal with the challenges of risk and mitigation and the evolving insurance market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very fortunate. I speak to my colleagues in other states all the time. Louisiana and Florida obviously have similar risks, but Ricardo Lara in California is someone that I talk to on a very regular basis because they're dealing with similar situations, and all the states, honestly, you hit the nail on the head. There are unique challenges emerging, or maybe latent challenges that are now more recognized in the landscape now, that cause for a lot of collaboration to be necessary among the states. And one of the things I always say is look to Florida. Because we just following Hurricane Andrew, we found ourselves in a very unique situation. Look at the things we've done well, but also the things we've done wrong. We also took plenty of wrong turns along the way. We're not always going to be perfect, but we've had no choice but to try and get out in front of the next thing that was coming. And the NAIC and other organizations like that give us a great forum to collaborate and talk about those things and work on national and international policy issues. And when we talk about, we learn from each other on what best practices are over time. And so when, I have a lot of conversations with California now. We've actually, as an office, Florida was the first state, and really is the only state in the country that has a public catastrophe model that can actually project out what a storm will do, so that we always have a neutral comparator when a company makes a rate filing here with a private model. We always have that comparator, and we've had it for 20 years now. California just partnered with the university, one of the universities in California, I think it was Stanford, to build their own version of that so that they have that comparator in wildfire risk. So different peril, but we work closely with them on how that's established, because it's the right thing to do. We're all, the crazy thing about insurance is at the end of the day, we're, by its very nature, we're socializing the risk. We're all in this together, and it's important that all the states continue to work together very closely on this stuff.
Absolutely. Just as we wrap up here, I'm sure the insurance landscape is, you're doing a lot of great work. And I feel like you have this solid enthusiasm, or just like, I feel reassured talking to you at least. But, the landscape is going to continue to be tricky. And, Florida is going to continue facing disaster risks, hazard risks. So what keeps you focused and hopeful given the challenges that your state still faces?
Well, there's a couple things. Number one, I feel like I have the best team in the country that supports me by far and away. I'm just very lucky to have the folks that work here helping us. We're all extraordinarily focused on making a difference for the betterment of Florida. So I'm extremely lucky with that. But beyond that, I when you look at the data and the science around it, the biggest challenge that we have is the unknown, and that's really the what we call social inflation. It continues to be the biggest challenge around it, which is waste, fraud, and abuse in the insurance market. And it's the other stuff we can actually rate around and provide clarity around the other risks very well. There's really good science. I don't know if you've ever met with or experienced any time with an actuary, but they are these brilliant, beautiful minds that can figure out how many trees are going to be in a forest in 50 years. It's really impressive work. The closest thing we have to people being able to predict the future. And so they are very good. There's the other side of me that is always like, we only have 70 years of hurricane data that's valid. Where we had something we had a satellite in orbit that could find out what the long term is. So there is some data loss there, but ultimately I think we're in a pretty good spot at this point with our risk for the short to midterm. There'll be some uncertainty in the 2030s, 2040s. There's projections that Florida will be a place that has 35 million people in it by the middle of the next decade. That's a lot of people. There's no doubt about it. But I think as long as we do, we've got to make sure that we keep our eye on the ball, and we're growing smartly, and we're growing with a good sense of realism about what can be done and what can't be done. I feel good.
Yeah. Well, Mike, this has been a really illuminating conversation. I know that being insured and resilient is so important. Just as it came across in the conversation, it's so clear. So I really hope that Floridians and other states can walk away from this episode with some really good tips and tools to mitigate, to prevent risk, and to stay safe. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. It's been truly a pleasure.
As Florida faces more frequent and severe storms, I think it's clear from today's conversation that purchasing insurance and implementing practical mitigation tools isn't just about protecting your property. It's about protecting your peace of mind. Mike reminded us that resilience starts long before the storm hits. We're in the midst of hurricane season, but Floridians, you could check out programs like My Safe Florida Home and the Florida Office of Insurance Regulations website to find the tools you need to take real, proactive steps to safeguard what matters most. You can find links to those resources in the show notes. We all need insurance these days, so make sure to share this episode with your neighbors, your community, or anyone who needs help navigating insurance. And if you haven't already, follow Empathy Affect wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay safe and well. Thanks, y'all.
Empathy Effect is a product of Forrest Marsh. You can reach us at forrestmarshmedia@forrestmarsh.com with any feedback, questions, or inquiries. If you want to know more about today's guest, are interested in participating with Forrest Marsh, or becoming part of our community, check out our show notes for more information.